For more on Japan's self-defense rights, I'm joined by Michael Czinkota, professor at Georgetown University's McDonough School of Business. Professor, welcome back to the show. What does this mean for the Japanese military, and who do you think this move is aimed at?
Well, in an overall context, I think it's important to recognize that, first of all, this is not a revision of the Constitution. The Constitution, which we've provided, and General MacArthur actually provided to Japan, still remains untouched. What it is, it's a reinterpretation. And these reinterpretations have really gone on for decades. It isn't that this is the first of its kind. It's already in the 1950s during the Korean War. The definition of what Japan could and could not do was marginally adjusted. This is, of course, an important adjustment, but as you said before, Japan is now moving from self-defense to collective self-defense. So that is really a definition. Who is the collective group? And of course, the expectation is that the U.S. is definitely part of that. And let's face it, the strategic alliances and the strategic power in the world is adjusting, and relationships therefore have to adjust as well.
But what about Japan's immediate neighbors? You know, you have South Korea and China very concerned about this. Do you think their concerns are justified?
Well, we always forget sometimes that things we're not exposed to directly may be something we forget easily, but others do not. I recall being at negotiations in Europe, and a Turkish representative was making was presenting why Turkey should become part of the European Union, and everybody nodded and said, absolutely, over time, we'll think about it. And the moment the Turkish representative had left the room, an Austrian representative turned to me and said, it'll never happen because we'll never forget the siege of Vienna. And I said, what siege? And he goes, well, in the 16th century. So people have long memories when it comes to pain inflicted upon them, and that makes them cautious and wary.
Do you think that there is support among the Japanese people for this reinterpretation? Because it appears that the government is making this declaration without the public's input.
Well, there is support within Japan. There's not what I would call overwhelming support, because Japanese themselves, let's not forget about the nuclear bombs in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Japanese themselves are very much aware and remembering the problems, difficulties, and deaths that happened on all sides. So there is opposition there. But keep in mind, from a strategic perspective, during when I think back during the Reagan and Bush administration, the motto was always a country has to do one of three things: feeding, funding, or fighting. And now in the U.S., we're basically saying a country cannot do one of those alone. They have to do two. And in Japan, we're looking for funding and fighting in case of need. And those are just the new realities. The U.S. is somewhat withdrawing from these areas, and that void has to be filled by someone else. And Japan is taking its place.
All right, Michael Czinkota, we appreciate your time and perspective. Thank you so much for joining us here on the show.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.